This is Dave. Dave is a New Zealand farmer that talks in a New Zealand farmer way. But Dave has a secret. He loves Australia. Dave talks about Australia all the time and about all his trips to the country. When he speaks about it, something interesting happens. He starts talking like an Australian. Kinda. This is Dale. Dale is exactly like Dave, only he doesn't like Australia that much. Not that he hates the country with a burning passion, he just hasn't been there and isn't that interested in going. When Dale talks about Australia, he also speaks like an Australian. Kinda-ish. The difference in New Zealand and Australian accents lie mostly in the vowels. These vowels are I, A, and the little AE thing that Elon Musk named his kid. These are represented by the words kit, trap, and dress.
Dress.
These words are the best examples for how these vowels are pronounced. The way that we measure these vowels is with what is called a formant. A formant is basically where in the mouth the sound of the vowel comes from. In these experiments, we focus on F1, or up and down, and F2, back and forward, in the mouth. In combination, these formants produce a vowel, and slight differences can appear between accents. We can prove this with experiments in linguistics, which is the study of language and how we produce and understand it. Here is the first experiment in a nutshell. The data used comes from a corpus of New Zealand speakers speaking. The recordings that were used in this study are those which include any mention of Australia or Australia-related things like kangaroos or Sydney. From these recordings, the kit, trap, and dress vowels are sampled at both the furthest point before and immediately after the inclusion of the Australian word, which we call a prime, because it preempts the subject that makes them susceptible to a particular response. In this case, dress. We then analyze the F1 and F2 values of before the primed condition and after to see if talking about Australia makes our brain produce Australian-sounding words. On average, this experiment showed us that there is a small but significant difference, making our basic New Zealand vowels sound more like the basic Australian vowels. However, this is only true for kit and trap. You guessed it, something different happened for dress. Oh, sorry, I forgot to include the
Dress.
The outcome was less like Australia. This led to another experiment which set out to determine why the results weren't as expected, because it couldn't be understood why talking about Australia primed two of the vowels and caused the opposite effect in dress. In the second experiment, we see why Dave and Dale speak slightly different to each other when talking about Australia. 31 Daves and Dales were asked to read a list of words with Australian primes. Then the same process from the first experiment, where F1 and F2 were measured for all the vowels and primed vowels. After the experiment, each participant filled out a questionnaire that indicated how much experience they had with Australia or Australian people. The results of this part of the experiment showed that people with more experience of Australia were more Australian sounding after being primed with Australian words. With this knowledge, the original data from the study could be analysed to find out if experience affected the dress results. By rating the original corpus recordings participants' experience, try saying that 5 times fast, from 1 to 100, and then applying it to the original findings, they found that people with more Australian experience already had a naturally more Australian dress vowel, which is what caused the opposite effect. What this shows is that Dave is slightly more Australian than Dale, and he really needs to stop talking about Australia because it's making him speak funny. It's also making me speak funny, most likely throughout this entire video.